better idea of what a post-Hitler world would look like. Even if to some Americans it was our last justifiable war, it more than provided the righteousness with which we'd embark on Bush and Clinton era peacekeeping missions. But the nation the show took hold over was far different than this. 2 days after its first episode, the beginning of the end started. So what anxieties, psychoses, and purpose of this show can we draw out of it now that so much time has passed? Let's see. So this was, doing this was sort of a late idea, and I kind of picked it because I felt like we went on a big tear of shows that were like definitely more targeted towards women. And I think those shows are also foundationally important for what we're looking at. But I noticed we had a dearth of shows that were kind of like not just for men, but for the target demo, and that had a huge effect over it around the time that I was a kid. Do you remember watching this when it was out?
Oh yeah, this was appointment television. You couldn't not. You got a bunch of dudes being guys together. Incredibly realistic combat. Guys doing bits with one another. It was appointment viewing. No one is not going to watch Band of Brothers.
Yeah, no. I didn't watch it when it was on, but I was like 10. I mean, I definitely watched it later. I think a lot of people like of my specific generation had the experience of like missing it as younger children, and then like as 15-year-old nerds like fucking loved it. And I definitely found it more engaging the first time I had watched it, but that's just because, you know, you've seen more movies, you've seen more war and super specifically World War II media, and you're like, oh, it's the same story every time. Like the wisecracking paratroopers who are from all different ethnic white enclaves of America, or the D-Day Rangers or whatever. Or, you know, we portrayed it so many fucking times. But I still loved, I mean, the first time I watched it, I was sort of obsessed with military history and the military and shit. I was just like barely out of my phase where I wanted to become a Green Beret.
Yes.
And then a liberal senator when I was like 14. And, but so I loved it. Like I was, you know, I was ostensibly like sort of left lib like my family. And yeah, I definitely didn't think we had any good wars, but I still liked it because it's like, even if you were like a lib, it was fun to watch a period of like American competency or accomplishment or even morality. What was the feeling you kind of got out of it when it was on, when you watched it for the first time?
I mean, I mostly just enjoyed the cool shootings and stuff. It was in that Saving Private. It was produced by Steven Spielberg, and it had that same sort of Saving Private Ryan immersiveness, which kind of reads as realism. It makes you feel like, wow, I know what it's like to go to war now. And I guess more than anything, you get that sense of understanding like a component of, you know, traditional male virtue that you can't imagine actually engaging in.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was, I feel like for a lot of people that watched it, like as like younger men or kids, like it was aspirational. Like everyone wanted to be Easy Company.
Oh yeah. I mean, just having friends, forget about the fact that you get to kill people together. The fact that you get to just have some actual bros. But
like, I mean, yeah, like I love the shootouts. I think they portray like warfare more interestingly, and I'm not going to say realistic. How would I know? But I think it's undeniably like a great way to portray it. Like they made it really engaging and sort of grounded in realism. So when something really exceptional and cool happened, like that scene where Winters runs up like 50 meters ahead of Easy Company and guns down those like 8 Germans in the trench, or, you know, any of the spear shit. It's that much cooler because it's like, oh, this guy probably really did this or something like this. And the way that this is sort of grounded a bit, it makes it very emotionally weighty and satisfying. Like the first time you watch that scene in the Battle of the Bulge episode where Spears like links up with I Company, just running past the Germans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll never forget that. That's so fucking cool.
Yeah, and you got to feel it was earned. You got like all the heroism felt not like programmatic. It felt like it was generated by like the characters and their relationships with each other and like their character as opposed to like a plot, a necessity or anything.
Yeah, I have to say I did like watching the show again. I probably thought it was like the best show I'd ever seen when I saw it for the first time. But like, yeah, now you recognize it as a very like, I think middlebrow is the way to put like all the non-combat stuff.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, it's definitely like Spielberg's milieu of like, you know, better than Michael Bay, but you know, not quite to a certain level, even though it has pretensions and aesthetic dalliances with that. But there isn't like a ton to say about this show. Like it's from historical memoir from, I think, was it Malarkey's memoir?
Well, I mean, I thought it was, I think it's from a few memoirs, but I think that its main source was the Stephen Ambrose book.
Oh,
because Stephen Ambrose was sort of the house. He was America, like the 90s end of history historian. He was the one who wrote about America from like the point of view of us having essentially one history and going back and going, okay, what did we do to win? And sort of breaking it down. So he wrote a book about, I believe, the Erie Canal at one point. But then he really made his celebrity writing about World War II, and he wrote that book, Band of Brothers, which was about Easy Company going from D-Day to the Eagle's Nest, and it absolutely galvanized people because it provided them with this narrative of, as you said, competence and morality at a time when no one really knew why we were doing anything.
Yeah. It's when would you say like the World War II genre sort of blew up? Because in my recollection, it feels like from 1999 to about 2007.
Yeah. It was the late 90s for sure. And the thing that really kicked it off was that fucking book that Brokaw wrote.
Yeah.
Greatest Generation.
Yeah,
That's really what like opened the fucking floodgates. That came out in 98, which was then like the same year as, I believe, Saving Private Ryan. And it's amazing how you can feel this sort of drifting culture and this yearning for absolutes and for the cleansing, clarifying power of a military engagement, just at the exact moment that we're heading straight into a civilizational conflict that is going to put us back into like a permanent war footing, but without any of the purpose or heroism that we were kind of imagining ourselves to want to see again.
I want to talk about the World War II genre a lot because I think it's so historically interesting. But in your recollection of it, sort of like, I feel like it changed in tenor after 9/11. Like, I think you can break it down into the late 90s kind, which was like definitely more marketed towards dads. And then after 9/11, after Band of Brothers, you saw like Medal of Honor, which was sort of like, it came before Call of Duty. But Medal of Honor and Call of Duty were both World War II shooters when they started. This is when they start marketing it to kids.
Yep.
And I think like that's obvious, right? That's like, hey, there's a place where you could do this.
All those stuff with direct Department of Defense collaboration all the way.
Yeah, and Spielberg. Spielberg worked on
of course,
Honor
the King Demon, yes.
Yeah. And yeah, if it wasn't marketing directly to recruit you, which worked for a lot of Call of Duty players, it was because these games were on PC first. You're marketing towards richer kids. The other message you get out to sort of the upper middle class kids is, hey, this is what the American military does. It's heroism. We're not always perfect, but we're, someone has to stop the evildoers.
Right. Even though you're way too comfortable to actually go and fight,
yeah,
you can rest assured that the mission will be carried out with morality and just like these guys doing it in your entertainment programs of choice.
Yeah, exactly. It's obviously direct recruitment for this creates more soldiers out of middle class flat brim kids and shit. But the thing it does to richer kids is make them liberal interventionists.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a real war happening at that time, but it's basically invisible. It's not on the news. Nobody, if you're of a certain economic class, you're probably not even going to encounter anybody who's involved in it. The only real war that you encounter is the simulated one that you're getting over and over again, and it's not our war. It's your your grandfather's war or whatever, which obviously isn't even anywhere near as simplified and feel good as it's presented. But even that is almost made horrifyingly parodic by the war that's actually being carried out during that same period.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on sort of the romanticization of World War II. That is something I noticed Band of Brothers does. I mean, Spielberg, the King Demon, this is his touch. You know how those combat scenes are so excited because they're grounded in a sort of realism?
Mm-hmm.
The scenes, the Holocaust liberation scene, or them giving chocolate to a kid in the Netherlands, just little vignettes like this. I'm sure a lot of these things absolutely happen. There's multiple recordings of it. Some of these things I'm sure happened. I'm sure a soldier gave candy to a kid, right? But there are these little, obviously they're very upfront about showing the gore and horror of war and the awfulness and panic that people die with. It isn't very heroic. They show people getting PTSD. When they liberate the Netherlands, they show them beating the shit out of those women who slept with Nazis. And it's all to say hey, this is a brutal world. This is a brutal world and people are bad, and even sometimes good guys are bad or not as heroic as you'd like them to seem. But that's the point of it. It's no, this is grounded in realism because I show these carefully selected bad things happening. So everything that isn't that, which is everyone wants this to fight this just war for the same reasons. There weren't any just awful murders of civilians by the Allied side. It makes that hit that much harder for people because the core thing isn't incredible. It's good. It's well written. The characters are engaging, but it's not I'll put it this way. You have the same characters who, again, yeah, they're real guys, but people remember their lives in a way for a reason. The same characters, the same archetypes they're played to, and you put them in I don't know, a fucking cop movie.
Yeah.
No one would remember it.
Yeah, there needed to be that needed to be the historical context because it was part of that whole phenomenon was really this sort of rediscovery, or I guess reification of the historical event that, was not anything relevant to most people because we don't live in a country with history. So
right.
Having World War II sort of recontextualized for an audience in a broad spectrum media assault is sort of is kind of amazing, and it's not a coincidence that that's the same time that the National World War II Memorial was constructed in Washington D.C. It was being built at the exact same time.
Yes, Yeah. And I feel like to that end, Band of Brothers was sort of like a testing ground for how they were going to market and war. And I mean, World War II movies for sure, but in general, it grew to every war movie, like what they were going to do that was going to work on people under 50.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, so the second time watching this and the first time watching it, the biggest change I noticed was how I saw the character Spears. The first time I watched, I felt like Spears was the coolest fucking character. I wish there was more of him. I thought he rocked. I thought like there should just be an entire Spears show. I would like read his Wikipedia article and see if he'd like killed any more people after the war or something. I think the thing about him abusing Albert Speer in prison was awesome. But the second time I watch it, I think it's a cool character, but for different reasons. Like I think it's cool to have someone who's like not necessarily good or bad, but commits atrocities because they're a part of war, or maybe he doesn't. Why does he seem to have this just complete stoicism in the face of death? And what's wrong with him?
Yeah.
Is this guy just a psychopath? Like, who doesn't care if he lives or dies? But the first time, if we're going to believe all the theories about Steven Spielberg and this type of thing, then that worked on me the first time, because the archetype of Spears just became how we marketed the operator.
Yeah.
They were
absolutely.
it can't just be that everyone's like a good soldier like Buck Compton or something, and they work as a team, and they're only as strong as their bonds, and they have this amazing love for each other. No, it has to be, there are guys who are way better at war than these guys.
Yeah.
And they're the coolest ones, and you're going to be that. You want to be that.
Yeah. I mean, that's part and parcel of getting rid of the defining characteristic of that World War II generation, which is that it was a conscripted, mass volunteered citizen army. Those guys were, for the most part, civilians. They were not career military officers. Not even they weren't. They had never considered being in the military, and as soon as they finished their tours, they left. Whereas the military now is a much more professionalized institution, and as a result, and it is entirely volunteer, which means that in addition to using just good old fashioned economic compulsion to get people to sign up, you need to invoke a spirit of elite tiers. The idea that
yes,
that if you work hard at this, if you really commit yourself to this, you will find an exalted position even within something that is like supposed to be this sort of egalitarian institution, and that not only does that provide like a motivative force to get the most potentially apt recruits to show up and fight, but also it ensures that there will be this imagined social wage to fighting. If you try hard enough, you can opt out of just being another schmuck if you're good enough at fighting.
Yeah, because that is the thing the young man wants more than anything, is to be admired.
Yes.
Is to be admired and feared by his peers.
Yes.
Like them being horny. I mean, it's almost the same emotion. They're in love with their male friend. They sort of fall in love with their friends.
Yes.
And want to impress them in the way that you would for someone you were in love with.
Yeah. Because, I mean, those are the only people they've been around for, years during the period where death is like right there, and motivating yourself to risk your life requires some sort of emotional connection, and like notions of nationalism or the virtue of the cause are always going to be more abstract than the actual people that you're surrounded with.
Yes. Yeah. And, if they're lucky, there are some kids in like Iowa or Nebraska who maybe they have the thing that makes Spears tick.
Yeah.
Maybe they just like don't lose any sleep over anyone they've ever killed, do not care about their own lives. Deep State could always use more of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And making sure that there's an awareness of that option is important.
Yeah. What did you feel about the Holocaust episode?
Huh. I mean, it's, I guess more than anything, it just felt very of a piece with the whole period, the whole approach to the material, the whole approach to World War II as a chance for America, sort of by contrast to another power, to exemplify sort of a virtue that ratifies any number of feats of arms by virtue of its distinction from a worse force.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that didn't, I mean, I clocked it, but it didn't upset me the first time I watched it. And it's a good episode. Like, I do like the scene where that, like, fat German baker, where they're commandeering his bread. And I think Moose, it's Moose, like the big ruddy farm kid.
Yeah.
Is like, you didn't smell it. Like, you didn't notice this, like, sticks a gun in his face. And it's like, I kind of like that because it was ambiguous and it did, like, sort of speak to something that's true, that it's like, okay, how many people in West Germany after the war just, like, we already know about the recruitment of Nazis in both America and here and all over the world, but how many people were just like, maybe they knew what was going on down the street and they didn't give a shit. And it's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to build the foundations of a new thing out of that? But the thing that actually, did make me mad the second time was the episode being called Why We Fight. Because it's like, that's why we entered World War II.
Right.
That's it. It's just, I mean, that's like, it lacks the subtlety of usual Spielberg / NATO collabs.
Right. Especially since it's absurd. Obviously, historically, it's not why we fought World War II, but it's also not why these guys fought the war. As we said, they fought for each other. That's where the motivation for war actually, the motivation of troops to actually fight is in the moment of the fighting, and is in the context of relationships they have with the people they fight with, not in any motivative sense, abstract ideas.
Yes, there have been, without exaggeration, throughout the history of civilization, or maybe even pre-civilization, 1 billion people killed just because one guy wanted to impress his other male friends.
Yeah.
That could be the biggest reason why the individual soldier is able to kill.
Yeah. They don't want to look like a coward.
Yeah. Yeah, but I did like this string of episodes at the end. Like, I feel like the series is strongest at the beginning, obviously. Like, the behind enemy line stuff is very cool, intense. I like how it's filmed. It's every gunfight is incredibly engaging. I feel like it drags a bit towards the middle. Like, I feel like the Battle of the Bulge scene, they kind of had their hands tied a little bit with just
they're
like
just sitting in fucking holes in the cold.
Yeah, but it just, it still drags a bit. But I did like this part at the end where it's the period right before Hitler kills himself, then through to VJ Day. And I did kind of like it because it's like all those scenes of like soldiers just randomly getting into car accidents and fucking dying, like doing test jumps for Captain Nixon and shit. Like, again, like, I'm sure most of these things assuredly happened, but I did like that it was portrayed, because it is like, there's like, death is absurd There's no reason why it comes. Why do you live through Carrington and the Battle of the Bulge and a fucking like barrel of Millet falls off a truck?
Yeah.
And you just die crashing into a tree after all that.
Yeah.
Like that because the entire series before it is like, no, these guys are special. They have both the special characteristics of themselves for being the best soldiers, but also everything that makes Americans great. They're a multi-ethnic fighting force with no black people.
Yeah.
They're they'll get ethnic squabbles about like who's a Jew or who's not, but it all works together because they're fighting for them. They're fighting for each other.
Yeah.
They're fighting for their their brothers, because the entire thing before that is, no, they're special. When they die, it's like it's an unimaginable pain, or just head straight on with the enemy, just getting blown up by artillery. They will always find a way out. Easy company will always prevail, even if men fall. Their powers almost seem supernatural in Spears. And then it gets to the end and it's like, no, they're just guys and they die for the same idiotic, pointless, sad, ignominious reasons that everyone else does.
Yeah. And that's hard. It's hard to get that across in any war film that maintains a war series that maintains a stable cast of characters, because as long as the guys who don't die, the longer they live, the more they become realized to the audience, and the more just the fact that they are alive like validates their existence and sort of makes them transcend the conflict they're in and transcend the risks that they're in. And it's important, if you're gonna like get anywhere near the truth of war, to puncture that somehow or another, to reassert the fundamental randomness of it, because the narrative itself sort of imposes sort of a godlike preference for some characters over others.
Yeah. And, I felt like the point of having these scenes sort of like define these two episodes, I shudder a bit thinking about what the evil point of that may be. I mean, I'm thinking about the side of it that makes sense, that narratively flows, that thematically flows, and I hope that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But the other reason could be like, no, you can be a god in war. The second it's over, the second you leave, you're just some asshole.
Yep.
You just get fucking splattered by a propeller. You're immortal in war. You have meaning in war. Otherwise, you're just driving around, getting fucked up, dying.
Yeah,
for no reason.
Because the death, if you die in the war, and even if you are one of the characters who dies, like the fact that you died in the war, you died for the cause of the war, whatever that is, even if it's just your friends, then your death has meaning. In a sense, everybody who survives the war, as soon as the last gun goes silent, is sort of doomed to a death that will, in some real sense, be meaningless in a way that their deaths would not have been if they had actually caught a bullet during the war itself.
Yeah. And I guess, like, there are other, like, ignominious fates befalling people, right? Or befalling our heroes. But, I mean, we talked about this on Mad Men, but those stories that, like, older than boomers, like Silent Generation or Greatest Generation, and some older boomers, I guess, tell, where it's just, like, a pointless story where their friend dies at the end mysteriously.
Yeah.
Like, I like that as a theme of an older America. But, it might be the same point. But again, those things really did happen. Boomers are, well, not boomers. Old people are just, they are, before 1985 about, I think just half of all men who died war stories like that. Like it was just some guy you played pool with who like fell and his push lawnmower slowly decapitated him. That was just, I guess we don't get deaths like that in America anymore. But
now it's just botched gender reveals. That's how you die. You blow yourself up trying to make a big barrel of blue chalk explode in a national park to set a forest fire.
There's this like David Sedaris thing where, I mean, I just assume anyone who writes like 5 autobiographies and they're all like funny, but their only job ever is like being a writer.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I assume a lot of it's made up, but you know, if anything, that makes it better writing. But the thing where he talks about his dad, just anytime they did something that was dangerous or not even dangerous, just he would see some visual prompt that would remind him of it, where he would go, "Oh yeah, you know, I had a friend who would like take the mail out from the mailbox, and you know, one day his foot accidentally hit the accelerator and he ripped his arm off, and now he had to marry a woman from a catalog." Like just insane things like that. And then when the dad's old, he's like, "Were any of those true?" And the dad's like, "No, I a few of them." I hope I'm like that when I'm old. That's fucking cool. I don't know why the Greatest Generation and the Silent Generation like doing that so much, but you know, death is absurd.
Yeah, and that's a thing that that's harder for younger Americans who grew up in the lap of prosperity anyway to really get their head around, because the fundamental and not even conscious understanding of your place as an American post the troubles of World War II, and if you're out of like the thresher of you know a marginalized or systematically impoverished community, is that life exists. America exists basically for you. America exists for your flowering and comfort. And in such a situation, death cannot be absurd. It has to be meaningful, if only in its horror, to like sort of rebel against, I guess, to define the meaning of one's life as an American against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you watch The Pacific after this?
I did, and it's not as good.
No, it really isn't. And
I think a lot of it is that it was instead of coming from a one history of one group of soldiers, it is cobbled together from the memoirs of a bunch of different guys who fought in the Pacific and didn't really know each other, and that just drained all of it of that we were talking about, that sense of earned emotion in every battle scene, for example. And like the band of brothers made you feel by making you feel for these guys and feel more than anything for their relationships and the emotions they have for each other, which means the deaths have the meaning because you understand them in the context of these relationships. But in the Pacific, I mean, in a way, it's more, I guess, it's a more realistic depiction of war, in that it is more nihilistic in that sense. It is deaths just happen. The people who die, you don't really know who they are. The people who are heroic sort of come out of nowhere, and that is more true to life. But it makes it for a much less compelling television show.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I also feel like it was just they had read enough forum posts about it. that was one of the top issues on forums until they made it, was making Band of Brothers for the Pacific. But it's again one of those shows that I think is coolly shot, but it just doesn't grab you. They weren't trying as hard.
Yeah, I mean, war, the alienating and horrifying nature of war is such that if it's done realistically in like not in a aesthetic sense, but in a sort of a moral or emotional sense, you wouldn't want to watch too much of it.
No, yeah.
And the Pacific, because it's devoid of some of those romantic trappings that Band of Brothers have, is really kind of just, oh, this is war. It's just kind of gross.
Yeah. Yeah. You're just dirty all the time and you'll never be normal again.
Yeah.
You just fucking die. But, that makes me, the Pacific is sort of the evolution of the war genre, because once they figured out they could go to video games, it was over. Like, they completely locked in kids. But, like, for older media consumers, the Pacific did sort of pretend things to come, because there were a lot of attempts at this type of thing before. Remember all those, like, bad liberal Iraq war movies?
Oh, God.
Where nothing would happen?
The Valley of Ella.
Yeah. Or just, like, the ones that are supposed to be good, but are just the Hurt Locker.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they tried this. They tried that Green Zone movie with Matt Damon.
Oh man, that was something.
This shit bombed. If you wanted to lose money on a movie in 2006, you would make a realistic movie about Iraq.
Yes.
No one wanted to see that shit. But the Pacific, it sort of refined that a little bit. They had the benefit of, still working with the good war, with World War II.
Yes.
In this more underexplored arena of of obviously a heavily researched subject, but I mean for American media, you don't see a lot in the Pacific. And, it was popular with a certain type of guy. But because that's anything you do see of the war genre now is sort of that.
Mm-hmm.
Even when it's a ridiculous sort of like Michael Bay movie, like, that fucking bullshit movie we saw about the horse guys in Afghanistan.
Oh yes, the horse soldiers.
Yeah, that movie was written and actually looked like one of those Christian movies that we watch.
Oh yeah,
it was like an actual studio was behind it, but it's still it still had all those cues from the Pacific, from Band of Brothers, and then the refinement process after, where it's like, no, even if this is like fucking like Christian movie horseshit, we can make it really fucking visceral and awful when someone gets shot, or we can make the camera dirty, or we can move it around a bunch. The only war movie that I've seen recently, actually, that doesn't follow this, like, actual war movie of the genre, is the Benghazi movie.
Ha!
Because that's an action movie.
Yeah.
With, some Hillary grievances thrown in. But that's, it's more true to how war movies kind of were.
Yeah. No, that movie, Michael Bay he's incapable of he's incapable of the pretension of of someone trying to take a thing like the Benghazi attack seriously.
Yes.
His own sort of vulgar showmanship just oozes out of it, and it becomes the only thing that you can care about if you're him, is just the shower of rocks and the flashes and the slow-mo. There's no way to there's no time for bathos. There's no time for that heavy hand of sentimentality, because he is not a sentimental man.
No. He's an auteur, but not a sentimental man.
No.
So there have been attempts to revive the World War II genre. Call of Duty did a World War II reboot. There's been some fictional stuff, but do you ever see it coming back? Because I really don't. I don't see them succeeding at that.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about how the monoculture is dead and how everything is narrowcast and everything now has a partisans locked into it in order to, be cast towards a given demographic audience. And World War II really was this like monocultural event. And with it gone, with that frame of reference for culture gone, it seems hard to imagine anybody getting behind and like reintroducing to people, the younger people who now once again have no idea what World War II is because nobody knows history. It wasn't even track. It wouldn't even really make sense to see anything like that as a new like model for entertainment.
And I think there's the obvious reason, younger millennials and Zoomers just, they have no emotional attachment to it. Like, they're too young for their grandparents to have even fought in it a lot of the time. And yeah, it just, I don't think that's necessarily like the worst thing in the world. Like, I think it's, if anything, it's sort of unhealthy to have one war stand out as the good, just one, and like the most important war that ever happened. Even if it was, because, we talked extensively about how that gets used. But, I would hope that they eventually learn what it is. I think it's important to know. But also, I think even if it was fresher in the cultural memory, I still think you would have trouble selling it to younger people, because even for millennials, like mid to older millennials, the fact that there was still more of a promise of a defined monocultural American future before 2008, it gave us something. We had something to look to and reference for the future that was coming.
Yeah.
Or for what our adulthood would be like, or just what it means to be a person in this country. Yeah. At just the moral level. But for Zoomers, they don't have anything like that.
Yeah.
They don't have any like unique ambitions for the country or anything. And it's like, why would they?
Yeah, right. There's
all they've known is like a country that can't do anything.
And that doesn't even have any imagined cohesive identity. I just remember there was a World War II movie that came out this last year, and it was very clearly kind of a get the gang back together thing to try to squeeze a little bit of juice out of the remaining History Channel dads who haven't died of coronavirus yet. And that was this movie Greyhound that was written and directed by Tom Hanks, who literally was the avatar of this entire fucking movement. He is the star of Saving Private Ryan. I think he helped produce Band of Brothers.
Yeah, he did. And
he directed and wrote it. And it's about a naval commander fighting off U-boats in the North Atlantic. Good old-fashioned naval combat. Something that is about the least relevant sort of thing to the American experience, even of eternal war that we have. Just reminding you of how much this has now gone from being something that was the culture, Call of Duty, Saving Private Ryan, to a very narrow cast pitch to a very specific demographic of older dudes who have vague memories of when the country used to make sense, and guys you'd stand in the deck of a boat and say fire the torpedoes or whatever the fuck.
Even with Biden sort of causing a little bit of a time warp, it's not going to happen for anyone younger than 60.
Yeah.
What do you see as sort of the future of the war genre, though? Like, how do you think, because I feel like for, people under 18 or even like 18 to 24, like, they don't have to use like World War II video games. They can just, any Call of Duty works. But for like, how we talked about how this can lay the groundwork for someone to be a liberal interventionist, for those kids, for the kids that like don't play COD, because COD is a lot of like kids who are going to be future Tony Blinkens and shit aren't playing COD.
Yeah.
For like the movies and shows. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I always just, it seems to me like any sort of actual historical peg just becomes too fraught, just as a matter of because these are all just all these projects now. The only presiding thing is the algorithmic determination of audience viability, and so like what war will meet that that demand? And I don't know if we're gonna see any more like at least like in terms you'll see it once in a while, a movie come out, but I don't think we're gonna get like a resurgence of any kind of filmic interest or television interest in a specific conflict anymore.
Yeah, I think if anything, it will be fictional wars.
Yeah, exactly.
Or wars that are so out of American cultural perception that you can do whatever you want with them.
Yeah, perhaps wars amongst the stars.
Yeah, no, yeah, probably. I'm just not into Star Wars at all, but I'm gonna say that it made everyone a liberal interventionist.
Oh, 100%.
Did it?
I mean, in the sense that everybody just kind of goes with the flow, and culture just sort of replicates the logic of the empires that are within it. Then yeah, I mean, who cares what George Lucas said about how the Ewoks are the Viet Cong? I mean, we don't see things that way. We are always the good guys, and so the characters that we identify with in any military, any conflict that's played out on screen, we identify with the people we identify with are us, and that means that it transcends the logic of the story itself, and reinforces our place in the world, which especially after World War II was defined by as global police power, if not authority, and that reality of American power structures all of our relationships to everything that we consume artistically.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I don't even think we're going to get a lot of miniseries in the future.
Oh no, so miniseries are pretty much over with, it seems like now. I mean, you got like limited series, which I guess is the same thing. But I mean, more than anything, the budgets just aren't going to be there for that kind of thing.
No, yeah.
Because as we talked about, if there's no more, like if film is now, if there is movies anymore, if that is fully the realm of giant budgets for giant returns, then then television on the streaming services is going to be narrowcasting for marginal returns that depend on low budgets.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not like we're losing a necessarily great genre. We're losing the most middlebrow genres. But yeah, no, they just don't have a lot of use for it outside of fiction and video games.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all I can say about Band of Brothers.
It was a time, though, wasn't it? When
it really was.
The towers came down, and we had a fantasy ready-made for us of virtuous violence that we could carry out.
Yeah,
we could be with your friends. You could have friends and go and fight with them, and some of them would die, but not you. And then you would have and then the real war, the real World War II would be the friends you made along the way.
Well, I mean, if not for anything else, this was significantly better than this era's equivalent military propaganda, Captain Marvel.
Ooh, man. At least there's, I mean, my God, at least show me some fucking, if you're going to do this, if we're going to do military propaganda for our fucking globe-spanning empire, at least give me some fucking squibs.
Yeah, no. I mean, I would obviously make that trade. Get rid of the Marvel bullshit to have like 5 middling World War II movies every year that everyone sees for some reason. Yeah, I'll take that.
I would absolutely take it. Some just guys getting air-holed with a fucking with a burp gun. Just let me see it.
Oh yeah, that is the one thing that upset me about the gun aspect of Band of Brothers. I wanted to see more M3 grease guns.
Those are cool.
Those are fucking awesome. But yeah, no, Hollywood, if you're listening, we'll do the World War II for Marvel trade. Put some grease guns and squibs in the movie.